Gaumata or Sphenidates appears in epigraphical and historiographical sources of classical antiquity as a late 6th century BCE Mede who usurped the Achaemenid throne by impersonating a member of the ruling family. The usurper is named Gaumata in the Behistun inscription of Darius I, named Smerdis in Herodotus' histories, and is named Sphenidates in the surviving fragments of Ctesias. Other sources have other names. This story was immensely popular in antiquity and later in Hellenistic times, and many versions of the tale circulated around the rim of the Western Mediterranean, while the primary sources do not agree on the names and many other details. The three oldest surviving sources all portray Gaumata, pseudo-Smerdis, Sphenidates as an impostor who usurped the throne by posing as one of the sons of Cyrus, i.e., as one of the brothers of Cambyses. In Darius' a trilingual Behistun inscription, the prince being impersonated is named Pirtia in Elamite, Bardia in Old Persian, and Bartia in Akkadian. In the histories, the prince and his impostor have the same name. For Ctesias, Sphenidates poses as Tanioxarses. Other Greek sources have various other names for the figure being impersonated, including Tanoxares, Merges and Mardosa. The three oldest surviving sources also agree that Gaumata, pseudo-Smerdis, Sphenidates is overthrown by Darius and others in Akudea, and that Darius then ascends the throne. Most sources have Darius as part of a group of 7 conspirators. In Greek and Latin sources, Darius subsequently gained kingship by cheating in a contest. The evaluation of the primary sources has been cause for much disagreement in modern scholarship. While there is agreement that Darius seized the throne through Akudea, there is dissent over whether Gaumata, pseudo-Smerdis, Sphenidates was in fact an impostor, or whether Darius merely made him out to be one. The key argument against a fabrication is that there is no evidence for it. The key argument for a fabrication is that Darius had reason to invent the story since he had no particular rights to the throne. In the primary sources, in Darius' Behistun inscription, the story of Gaumata, pseudo-Smerdis, Sphenidates appears in Darius' own Behistun inscription, a summary of the relevant portion of which is as follows. King Cambyses, a son of Cyrus, had a full brother, Bardia. Cambyses had Bardia killed, and succeeded in keeping that a secret from the people. While Cambyses was away in Egypt, rebellions developed in Persia and in Media and in other provinces. A Magish by the name of Gaumata began to proclaim himself as Bardia, and seized the kingship in all the rebellious territory. Cambyses, still in Egypt, committed suicide. Out of fear of retribution from Gaumata, the people remained quiet. Then Darius, knowing that Gaumata was not the real Bardia, with the aid of a few men and with the divine support of Ahura Mazda, fought with and killed Gaumata and his foremost followers at the fortress of Vatish in Media. Darius then became king. A section of the Behistun inscription of a later date has another rebel, a certain Vahidarbab, also claiming to be Bardia. In Herodotus' Histories, a longer version of the story appears in Book 3 of Herodotus' Histories, written c. 450 BCE. That story there is as follows. While in Egypt, Cambyses accidentally wounds the thigh of the sacred bull worshipped as the god Apis, and when the sacred bull dies from the wound, Cambyses loses his sanity. Jealous of his brother Smerdis' skill with a particular bow brought from the king of Ethiopia, Cambyses sends Smerdis back to Persis. Cambyses then has a dream in which Smerdis would supplant him, so he sends a henchman to murder him secretly. The assassination succeeds, and can be kept a secret. One of the few that know of Smerdis' death is Patises, the steward of Cambyses' palace at Susa. That steward has a brother who greatly resembles Smerdis in appearance, and whose name is also Smerdis. The steward then puts his brother on the throne, and has him pretend that he is the brother of Cambyses. The false Smerdis succeeds in the deception by not allowing anyone who knew the real Smerdis into his presence. Still in Egypt, Cambyses learns of the false Smerdis, and knowing that the real Smerdis is dead, recognizes the deception. Cambyses then readies his army to return to Susa, but while mounting his horse accidentally injures his thigh from the point of his sword. Cambyses dies from the wound a few days later. On his deathbed, Cambyses perceives Smerdis as favoring a return to Median hegemony. The false Smerdis then continues to rule at Susa for some time, and gains support from everyone except the Persians when he grants a 3-year military draft and tax exemption to the various peoples of the empire. Meanwhile, Otanus, a nobleman of Persis, suspects that the king is not the brother of Cambyses, but rather the Smerdis whose ears Cyrus had commanded be cut off for some grave reason. To confirm his suspicion, Otanus asks his daughter Fadime, who is a member of the harem and thus has access to the king, to check whether the man has ears. Fadime does as asked, and one night while the king is asleep, confirms that the king does not in fact have ears. His suspicions confirmed, Otanus then gathers 6 noblemen and plots to get rid of the false Smerdis. A 7th nobleman, Darius, arrives at the capital shortly thereafter, and is then included in the group. The 7 conspirators charge into the chambers of the king, and while 5 deal with the guards, Darius and Megabyzus kill the false Smerdis and a companion. 5 days later, after the tumult has died down, the 7 meet again to discuss a suitable form of government. After some discussion over the merits of democracy and oligarchy and monarchy, 4 of the 7 vote in favor of a monarchy. They then decide to hold a contest whereby whichever of them got his horse to neigh first after sunrise shall become king. Darius cheats and ascends the throne. In Stygia's Persica, Stygia's version runs as follows. King Cyrus, as he lay dying, appointed his elder son Cambyses to the throne, and appointed his younger son Tanioxarses governor of the provinces of Bactria, Corysmia, Parthia, and Carmania. Shortly after Cambyses ascends the throne, a certain Sphindidates, who had been whipped by Tanioxarses for some offense, informs Cambyses that his brother is plotting against him. As proof of this he declares that Tanioxarses would refuse to come if summoned. When Tanioxarses does not immediately accede to the summons, Cambyses begins to believe Sphindidates, who then begins to slander Tanioxarses more freely. By the time Tanioxarses finally arrives, Cambyses is determined to put him to death, but hesitates. Sphindidates suggests that, since he looks very much like Tanioxarses, he could take the prince's place. Cambyses agrees, and Tanioxarses is killed by being forced to drink bull's blood. Sphindidates then takes the place as governor of the eastern provinces. 5 years later, while in Babylon, Cambyses accidentally wounds himself in the thigh, and dies 11 days later. Upon hearing of Cambyses' death, Sphindidates alias Tanioxarses returns to the capital and succeeds Cambyses. Meanwhile, Isabates, a confidant of Cambyses who knew of the killing of Tanioxarses, is on his way with the body of Cambyses. Upon arriving at the capital and finding Sphindidates on the throne, Isabates exposes the fraud. Then, 7 noblemen conspire against Sphindidates. The 7 are admitted to the palace by a co-conspirator, where Sphindidates is then killed. The 7 then decide to hold a contest whereby whichever of them got his horse to neigh first after sunrise shall become king. Darius gets his horse to be the first to neigh and he ascends the throne. Reception. In antiquity, this story was immensely popular in antiquity and later in Hellenistic times, and many versions of the tale circulated around the rim of the Western Mediterranean. In scholarship, the evaluation of the sources has been cause for much disagreement in modern scholarship. While there is agreement that Darius seized the throne through a coup d'état, There is dissent over whether Gaumata, pseudo-Smrdish Sphenidates was in fact an impostor, or whether Darius merely made him out to be an impostor in order to justify his seizure of the throne. The key argument against a fabrication is that there is no evidence for it, and lacking further discoveries that view must remain hypothetical. The idea that Gaumata, pseudo-Smrdish Sphenidates was a fabrication is nonetheless appealing because it was vital for a man like Darius, who had no particular rights to the throne, to invent a character condemned for his acts against gods and men. In pop culture, this episode is dealt with by Gore Vidal in his novel Creation. He takes the view that the person who ruled for a few months was the real badia. Similarly, Tom Holland's Persian Fire, a figure named Gaumata, plays a minor role in the video game Age of Empires Online. One of the first quests for players of the Persian civilization is to kill him on Darius' orders. His supporters are fought in several other quests. The imposter magician Smrdish is a figure in George Louis Borges' short story by Ton Uqbar, Orbis Tertius. He is the only historical character that the protagonist is able to recognize when discovering the article on the fictitious nation of Uqbar, and his name is invoked mainly as a metaphor.